Introduction. Deep within the recesses of the collective human consciousness, there exists a silent engine that operates without fatigue or hesitation, driving the very fabric of our perceived reality through the intricate gears of belief and repetition. And this invisible force, often referred to as the secondary mind, serves as the bridge between the finite limitations of the soul for the work today. This force serves as the bridge between the physical body and the boundless potential of the universal energy that permeates all existence, where every thought is a seed planted in a soil of infinite richness that does not distinguish between weeds and flowers, but simply brings to fruition whatever is anchored in its depths with unwavering loyalty and absolute precision for the soul now. To understand this mechanism is to hold the keys to a kingdom that knows no borders, where the laws of physics bow to the frequency of conviction and the external world reflects the internal landscape with the fidelity of a polished mirror, reflecting the soul in every detail of its manifestation. As we look into the history of this hidden power in the world of the spirit today, we find that ancient civilizations and modern thinkers alike have touched upon the same fundamental truth, that our destiny is not written in the stars, but in the quiet whispers of our own inner dialogue, which shapes the cells of our being and the direction of our path through the vast ocean of time and space, where the only true limit is the one we impose for the work in the light now. The fog of uncertainty can be dissolved at any moment by the simple act of intentional command and focused will, because at the center of your existence there resides a power of almost infinite magnitude, waiting to be directed and waiting to be told what to build and what to destroy and what to become in the grand tapestry of the universe that is expanding in the world today. A universe is constantly expanding and contracting in response to the signals we send out into the void, which is never truly empty, but filled with the possibilities of everything that has been and everything that will ever be. And as we step into this journey of discovery, we must leave behind the baggage of past failures and the shadows of old regrets for the spirit now. We embrace the raw potential of the present moment, where the mind becomes a sharp instrument of creation, capable of carving beauty out of chaos and light out of darkness, through the persistent application of spiritual laws that are as consistent as gravity and as powerful as the sun itself, radiating outward from the core of our being to touch every aspect in the world today. Transformation begins with a single focused intention and grows into a tidal wave of change that redefines what it means to be alive and what it means to be the architect of one's own reality in a world that is always watching and always responding to the frequency we choose to inhabit as we move forward through the corridors of the mind for the all in the light now. We are exploring the hidden rooms and the locked doors that contain the treasures of our true heritage as beings of light and will, who have forgotten the extent of our own influence over the matter that surrounds us and the spirit that sustains us in every breath and every heartbeat that echoes the pulse of the cosmos in a rhythmic dance of existence today. The dance is both ancient and brand new in every second of its unfolding glory and magnificence as the story begins to take shape in the silence of the unspoken word, unfolding into a vast landscape of pure potential where the boundaries between the dreamer and the dream begin to dissolve into a singular point of radiant awareness that transcends time and space now. The silent echoes of the inner voice reverberate through the chambers of the spirit, calling forth the hidden giants of ambition and the dormant architects of destiny who have slept for eons beneath the surface of the mundane world, waiting for the precise frequency of command to awaken and begin the construction of a reality that matches the vision for the soul today. Every pulse of thought acts as a ripple in an endless ocean of energetic possibilities, moving outward with the speed of light to rearrange the atoms of the environment and align the circumstances of life with the dominant vibration of the heart, which serves as the ultimate compass in this journey through the unseen dimensions of power and influence for the work now. These dimensions govern the rise and fall of civilizations and the birth and death of stars, within the laboratory of the mind, where the only tools required are the clarity of purpose and the persistence of belief, which act as the hammer and chisel of the gods, carving out a path of gold through the granite of resistance and the sands of opinion in the world today. External opinions have no true power over the one who has claimed their throne within the inner kingdom of the self, as the story expands further into the reaches of the unknown, where the logic of the waking world fails and the intuition of the deep mind takes over leading the seeker toward the realization that they are not a mere passenger for the spirit now. The seeker realizes they are the very consciousness that gives the rock its weight and the void its meaning through the act of observation and the power of focused attention, which concentrates the scattered rays of the sun into a burning point of transformation capable of igniting the fire of genius and the flame of eternal truth in every corner today. The heavy cloak of ignorance and the chains of a limiting past no longer exist except in the fading memory of a ghost that has been given permission to haunt the hallways of the present till the final declaration of independence is made in the quiet center of the storm, where peace and power reside in perfect harmony as the architecture of the future is set now. The future is drafted in the ink of desire upon the parchment of the infinite, and the words of power are spoken into the stillness to create something from nothing and everything from the essence of the one who dares to speak their truth into the ear of the cosmos, which is always listening and always ready to obey the orders of its master today. The master has finally remembered how to speak the language of the source and how to walk the path of the ancient ones, who knew that the mind is the only true reality, and the world is but a shadow cast by the light of the internal fire that burns forever with the intensity of 1,000 suns and the gentleness of a summer breeze for the radiant soul now. Chapter 1. The Genesis of the Internal Architect. The first step into the deep cavern of the self begins with the realization that the mind is not a single monolith, but a layered orchestration of forces working in tandem to project the holographic experience we call life. And at the very foundation of this structure lies the subconscious, which acts as the silent recorder of every impression emotion in the world today. The subconscious acts as the recorder of every sensory detail ever encountered since the moment of conception, forming a massive reservoir of data that dictates the automatic responses of the physical body and the habitual patterns of the thinking brain. And to master this domain, one must first understand that the subconscious does not reason or argue for the spirit now. The subconscious accepts the blueprints handed down by the conscious mind with the absolute obedience of a servant who does not question the morality or the logic of the master command, and this relationship is the secret hinge upon which the door of destiny swings. Because if the conscious mind is the captain of the ship, the subconscious is the engine room for the all now. The engine room and the crew will drive the vessel into the storm or into the calm harbor, based entirely on the coordinates provided by the navigator. And thus the first chapter of our transformation is the reclamation of the captaincy, where we stop being reactive victims of the winds and start being proactive authors of the script for the soul today. We examine the nature of this internal architect and find that it is governed by the law of belief, which states that whatever is impressed upon the subconscious will eventually be expressed in the external conditions of the world. And this is not a metaphorical concept, but a functional reality that operates with the same consistency as the law today. The consistency of the law of gravity, or the movement of the tides, because the subconscious is the medium through which the formless energy of the universe becomes solidified into the forms of matter and the events of time, and therefore the primary task of the seeker is the purification of the mental atmosphere and the deliberate selection of the thoughts now. The selection of thoughts are allowed to take root in the fertile soil of the deep mind, where they will be nurtured by the life force until they reach the stage of full manifestation. And this process requires a level of vigilance that most people have never practiced, as they allow the suggestions of the world and the fears of the media for the spirit today The seeker must stand as a sentry at the gate of their own consciousness, choosing only those ideas that align with the highest version of themselves and rejecting every thought of lack, limitation, or failure as a foreign invader that has no right to occupy space of a sovereign being, and as this practice of mental hygiene becomes a habit today. The old thorns of past trauma are replaced by the vibrant flowers of a new identity that is anchored in the certainty of its own creative power and the understanding that the external world is nothing more than a delayed reaction to the internal state of being, which means that to change the harvest, one must change the seeds for the soul in the light now. To change the reflection, one must change the face that looks into the mirror of the infinite. And this is where the true work of the audiobook listener begins, in the quiet moments of the morning and the heavy silence of the night, when the conscious mind is relaxed and the veil between the layers of the mind is at its thinnest point in the world today. It is in these windows of receptivity that the most powerful commands can be delivered directly to the core of the subconscious, bypassing the critical faculty of the analytical brain and sinking deep into the foundations of the soul to rewrite the codes of poverty into the codes of abundance and the codes of weakness into strength for the all now. The codes are rewritten with the quiet authority of a creator who knows that their word is law in the kingdom of their own mind, and as the story of the self is rewritten, the body begins to vibrate at a different frequency, attracting new people, new opportunities, and new levels of health that were previously thought to be impossible in the spirit today. Luck is merely the name given to the results of laws that are not yet understood by the observer. And once the law of the subconscious is mastered, the concept of chance disappears and is replaced by the concept of cause and effect, where the mind is the cause, cunning. Life is the effect in an endless loop of creation for the soul in the light now. The light expands as far as the imagination is allowed to roam, and as the listener absorbs these words, the barriers of the old self begin to crumble, and the light of the internal architect begins to shine through the cracks, leading the way toward a future that is not a repetition of the past, but a brand new invention in the world today. The invention is born from the marriage of intention and belief in the sanctuary of the silent mind, where everything is possible, and nothing is hidden from the eye of the one who truly knows how to look into the depths and speak the truth of their own divinity into the ear of the cosmos that is always listening and always ready for the spirit now. The cosmos is ready to bring the vision into the light of day with the power of 1,000 suns and the grace of the eternal spirit that moves through all things and binds the universe together in a web of light and purpose that knows no end and no beginning, but only the eternal now of the present moment, where all power resides in the world today. All change is born from the spark of a single thought, held with conviction and released with love into the waiting arms of the infinite. The expansion of this foundation requires a deeper immersion into the mechanics of mental impression, where the seeker recognizes that every word spoken with emotion acts as a direct command for the all now. Every image held with intensity acts as a direct command to the subconscious faculty, which lacks the ability to differentiate between a physical event occurring in the three-dimensional world and a mental event occurring within the theater of the mind. And this inherent quality is the most potent weapon in the arsenal of the internal architect today. The architect allows for the pre-paving of future experiences by saturating the inner senses with the feeling of the wish fulfilled long before the external senses can verify its existence as a solid reality. And as we delve further into this first stage of awakening, we must address the silent resistance of the ego for the soul now. The ego often attempts to sabotage the transformation by whispering echoes of past limitations and citing the evidence of the current environment as proof that change is impossible, but the master of the mind knows that the current environment is merely the dead husk of past thoughts and has no bearing on the potential of the next moment today. The work of the first chapter is the radical detachment from what is seen in order to focus entirely on what is felt within the secret place of the soul, where the blueprints of greatness are drawn in the ink of pure conviction, and the architect begins to realize that the subconscious is not only a recorder, but a direct link for the all-now. The subconscious is a link to the universal intelligence that coordinates the movement of the planets and the growth of the forest, which means that when a command is properly seated in the deep mind, the entire machinery of the cosmos begins to move in alignment to bring that command to pass through a series of coincidences in the world today. Synchronistic events that the rational mind could never have planned or predicted bring a profound sense of peace, because it removes the burden of the how and replaces it with a certainty of the what, as the seeker learns to rest in the knowledge that the internal work is the only work, and that the outer manifestation is math now. The outer manifestation is a mathematical certainty that follows the internal shift, with the same inevitability as light follows the sun, and as the listener continues to dwell on these truths, the cellular structure of their being begins to recalibrate to a higher state of efficiency, and the old habits of worry are dissolved today. The habits are dissolved in the acid of absolute truth, leaving behind a clear space where the new self can rise and breathe and command the elements of its existence, with a voice that does not tremble and a heart that does not waver. In its pursuit of the infinite, and the expansion of this consciousness is like the opening of petals now. The opening of 1,000 petals in the light of a new dawn, where the shadows of the old world are burned away by the radiance of a mind that has finally discovered its own origin and its own power to shape the clay of life into a masterpiece of beauty and harmony and strength that will stand as a testament for the spirit today. The testament will stand for generations to come as the journey continues deeper into the heart of the mystery, where the self and the source are found to be one, and the same in the eternal dance of creation that never sleeps and never fails to respond to the call of the one who knows how to ask and receive in the world now. A master of their own universe moves further into the structural integrity of this mental foundation, where we encounter the phenomenon of the psychic threshold, where the repeated suggestion finally penetrates the thick crust of habitual thinking to touch the core of the subconscious essence and the spirit in the light today. It is at this precise moment of contact that the transformation ceases to be a mere intellectual exercise and becomes a biological imperative, as the nervous system begins to relay new signals to every organ and every fiber of the physical vessel in response to the updated directives of the inner master for the work now. The process of expansion is not a violent struggle against the old self, but a gentle and persistent displacement of darkness by the introduction of light, where the architect focuses not on the eradication of fear, but on the cultivation of courage until the fear has no ground left to stand upon and the shadows retreat in the world today. The subconscious mind operates on the principle of least effort and highest efficiency, always following the path of the most dominant mental impression, which is why the quality of our inner imagery is of paramount importance in this construction phase, where we must learn to paint with the colors of triumph and textures for the soul now. The internal world is so vivid and so saturated with the feeling of reality that the external world feels like the dream, and the internal state feels like the only truth worth acknowledging. And as this state of consciousness becomes stabilized, the seeker begins to notice a strange and beautiful phenomenon for the spirit today. The law of attraction is activated in its most potent form, drawing to the center of the self everything that is necessary for the completion of the vision, without any frantic searching or desperate grasping on the part of the individual, who now walks with the steady gait of one who knows that their treasure is secured now. This expansion of the first chapter leads us to the threshold of the deep sleep state, which is the most fertile window for the planting of the final seeds of the day, where the conscious mind surrenders its control, and the subconscious remains wide open to the last thoughts held before a slip into slumber for the all today. The master uses these final moments to whisper the most sacred affirmations of health and wealth and love into the ear of the infinite, ensuring that the entire night is spent in the processing of these divine orders, so that upon waking the new day is greeted by a mind that has been working in the silence now. The mind prepares the way for the manifestation of the highest good, and as the listener integrates these principles into the very marrow of their bones, they find that the world no longer has the power to disturb their inner peace or dictate their level of success, because they have found the source of all supply today. They have learned to drink from the well that never runs dry, and to eat from the tree of life that bears fruit in every season, regardless of the economic climate or the social conditions that prevail in the world of shadows, where the masses still struggle in the dark, unaware of the light that they carry in the soul now. The genesis of the internal architect reaches its peak of intensity, and we see that the only true requirement for the journey is the willingness to let go of the small identity and embrace the vastness of the cosmic self that knows no boundaries and no limitations and no endings, only the eternal expansion today. The expansion of joy and power and creative expression occurs in a universe that was made for the delight of the one who knows how to dream with their eyes wide open and their hearts centered in the absolute certainty of their own divine heritage. And the story continues to unfold with every heartbeat and breath now. The new reality takes shape, and the old world fades into a distant memory of a dream that was once dreamed by someone who no longer exists, because they have been reborn in the fire of their own focused will and the light of their own eternal soul in the quiet majesty of the sanctuary of the silent mind for the all today. Chapter 2. The harmonics of the deep resonance. The transition from the initial awakening of the internal architect to the actual mastery of the energetic frequencies requires a profound shift in how one perceives the substance of thought itself. And as we enter this second stage of our journey, we must recognize that the mind is not merely a generator of ideas, but a broadcasting station that sends out waves of specific resonance into the ether in the world today. The station sends out waves into the etheric field that surrounds all living things, and this field, which is often called the universal subjective mind, acts as a highly sensitive medium that responds to the vibrations of our emotional states with the same accuracy that a piano string vibrates when its corresponding note is struck in the room, and for the spirit of the radiant soul now. The work of the second chapter focuses on the refinement of the emotional tone, because it is the feeling and not the cold intellectual thought that provides the fuel for the manifestation process. And we must understand that the subconscious mind is essentially the seat of the emotions, and it is through the heart that we speak the language of the infinite with the most clarity today. The seeker must learn to cultivate a state of constant inner harmony that is independent of the external noise of the world, which is often chaotic and contradictory, and this is achieved by the deliberate practice of mental discipline, where the individual refuses to entertain any vibration that does not harmonize with the final vision of their success and abundance for the all now. As the listener sinks deeper into this understanding, they begin to see that the world is not made of solid matter, but of dancing patterns, of energy that are held together by the glue of consciousness, and by changing the frequency of the observer, the patterns of the observed must necessarily change to maintain the equilibrium of the cosmic law and the spirit in the world today. When you step into the feeling of being wealthy, or being healthy, or being loved, you are not just pretending or engaging in a fantasy, but you are actually tuning your internal dial to a reality that already exists in the realm of the formless, and by maintaining that tuning, you allow that reality to harden into the visible world of form through the natural process of condensation now. The high frequency of thought slows down until it becomes the solid experience of physical life, and this requires a level of persistence that transcends the common understanding of effort, because it is not an effort of the muscles or the will in the traditional sense, but an effort of the attention to remain anchored in the desired state despite any evidence in the world today. The physical eyes may report contrary evidence, and as this chapter unfolds, we explore the concept of the mental equivalent, which suggests that we can only possess in the outer world what we have, first built as a complete and detailed structure within the inner world. And if the inner structure is shaky or filled with the cracks of doubt, the manifestation reflects the soul now. If the inner structure is built with the bricks of certainty and the mortar of joy, it will stand as an impregnable fortress that the storms of life cannot topple, and the architect begins to realize that they are the sole authority in their own mental universe, and that no person, no event, and no past circumstance has the power to interfere with the broadcast in the world today. The architect gives no permission to interfere by reacting with fear or anger, and thus the second stage of mastery is the development of a divine indifference toward the shadows of the past and a fierce devotion to the light of the present moment, where all creation is happening in a continuous stream of now, and as this resonance expands, it touches the body for the spirit now. The resonance initiates a process of rejuvenation and healing, because the subconscious mind is the builder of the body, and it follows the instructions of the soul with absolute fidelity. And when the soul speaks the words of wholeness and vitality, the body has no choice but to reflect that state in its physical health and energy levels for the work in the light today. The listener finds that they no longer need to struggle for the things they desire, because they have become a magnet for them through the simple act of being in the right frequency, and the flow of life becomes a river of grace that carries them toward their destiny with an ease that is breathtaking to behold, and the resonance continues into the professional spheres now. The individual becomes a point of light that influences everyone they encounter, not through words, but through the sheer power of their presence, which vibrates at a level that commands respect and inspires transformation in others as they subconsciously pick up on the frequency of the Master and are elevated by it in a silent exchange of energy for the spirit today. The exchange enriches the whole world, and this is the true meaning of being a creator in the image of the infinite, where the individual no longer lives for themselves alone, but becomes a channel through which the beauty and the power of the source can flow into the world of form to bless and to build and to create a new earth based on the laws of harmony now. The story of the mind continues to grow and deepen as the architect moves into the higher realms of the spirit, where the last vestiges of the ego are dissolved, and the individual realizes that they are the universe experiencing itself through a unique point of view, and that the power they have been seeking is the very substance of what they are in the world today. The end of the second chapter leaves the seeker standing on the edge of a great ocean of light, ready to dive into the depths and discover the final secrets of the self that have been hidden since the foundation of the world in the quiet center of the heart, where the silence speaks and the darkness shines and the power of the infinite is made manifest for the all now. The seeker discovers that the primary obstacle to the free flow of this power is the tendency to look backward at the ruins of what once was, instead of maintaining a steady gaze upon the horizon of what is becoming, and the internal architect must learn to treat the memories of lack and the echoes of old pain as mere phantoms that have no substance in the light today. The subconscious mind is always living in the eternal now, and it accepts the current emotional state as the only truth to be acted upon, and therefore the mastery of resonance involves a radical act of forgiveness where the individual releases the entire history of their perceived failures into the fire of the infinite and stands renewed in their divine potential now. The internal broadcast reaches a level of clarity that is undisturbed by the static of regret or the noise of self-reproach, and this clarity is the essential requirement for the crystallization of the mental equivalent into the physical experience, because a mind that is divided against itself cannot create a coherent reality, but a mind that is unified is power today. The unified mind becomes an unstoppable force of nature that commands the elements of life with the same authority that the sun commands the shadows to flee, And as the listener absorbs the frequency of these words, they find that their own internal dial is being adjusted to a higher octave of existence, where the limitations of the material world are seen for the soul now. Limitations are seen as temporary configurations of energy that can be rearranged at will by the power of the focused spirit, and the architect begins to experiment with this power in the smaller details of their daily life, noticing how the environment responds to their internal shifts, and how the people around them begin to reflect the new state of harmony today. This evidence serves to strengthen the faith and deepen the resonance until the individual reaches a point of absolute certainty where they no longer need to wait for the external manifestation to know that the thing is done, because they have already possessed it in the realm of the spirit, and they have already felt its texture and weight in the soul now. This sense of possession is the final touch that triggers the manifestation process in the world of form, where the universe is compelled by its own laws to produce the physical counterpart of the mental image, and the story of the mind continues to expand as the architect realizes that there is no limit to the heights they can reach in the spirit in the light today. The source from which they draw power is an inexhaustible fountain of life and wisdom that is always available to the one who knows how to listen and how to align themselves with the rhythm of the infinite. And as the second chapter reaches its grand crescendo, the listener is invited to step fully into the light of their own resonance and new world now. Every thought is a blessing, and every emotion is a song of praise to the Creator within, who is always building and always loving and always expanding into the vastness of the eternal, now where all paths lead back to the center of the self, and all questions are answered in the silence of the deep resonance that binds the cosmos together in the world today. The web of light and power will never fade and never fail to provide for the one who has found the key to the kingdom within and has learned to turn it with the hand of love and the heart of conviction. Delving even further into the harmonics of the inner soundscape, the architect must confront the subtle vibrations of the collective mind for the soul now. Collective vibrations often act as a gravitational pull, attempting to drag the individual back into the frequency of common struggle and shared limitation. And this is where the true strength of the deep resonance is tested, as the seeker must learn to insulate their internal atmosphere from the pervasive static of the world through a mental vacuum today. The vacuum allows only the chosen frequency of the divine self to exist, and this insulation is not achieved through a hard defensive posture, but through a total immersion in the feeling of the desired state, until the outer world becomes a distant and muffled whisper that has no power to interrupt the symphony of the soul and the work in the light now. The subconscious mind is like a vast and silent ocean that reflects the sky above it, and if the sky of the conscious mind is clear and filled with the light of high purpose, the ocean will be calm and deep and capable of supporting the most magnificent manifestations. But if the sky is clouded with the storms of collective fear, the ocean is chaos today. The second chapter of this internal transformation is the absolute commitment to the clarity of the inner sky through the persistent application of the law of substitution, where every negative suggestion from the environment is immediately replaced by a higher truth of the spirit. And as this practice becomes second nature, the architect finds power now. The architect is no longer affected by the fluctuations of the economy, or the opinions of the critics, or the shadows of historical precedent, because they have anchored their resonance in the unchanging reality of the infinite, which knows nothing of lack and nothing of failure. And as the story of the mind expands, the individual realizes healing today. The power of resonance is also the power of healing, because a body that is bathed in the frequency of divine harmony cannot sustain the vibrations of disease or decay, and the cells themselves begin to sing in unison with the new song of the spirit, restoring the temple of the body to its original state of perfection and vitality for the soul now. The seeker becomes a living example of the laws they have mastered, and their life becomes a beacon of light for others who are still searching for the way in the darkness of the old world. and the resonance of the heart continues to grow until it encompasses the entire field of human experience, and the architect sees that there is no separation today. The master of resonance is the master of life, and the music of the spheres is the music of our own thoughts when they are aligned with the eternal pulse of the Creator who is forever, singing the world into existence in the quiet center of our own being, where the silence is absolute and power is infinite, and the love remains for the soul now. As we dive even deeper into the structural layers of the subconscious foundation, we must address the concept of the mental bridge, which connects the current state of being to the future state of manifestation, and the architect understands that this bridge is built of the consistent repetition of the feeling of the wish fulfilled for the spirit today. Repetition acts as a spiritual cement that hardens under the pressure of faith and persistent attention, and the second chapter focuses on the stabilization of this bridge so that the individual can walk across the abyss of doubt without faltering or looking down at the shadows of past experiences that once held them captive in the soul now. To stabilize the resonance, one must adopt the practice of mental sealing, where the chosen vision is locked within the vault of the heart and protected from the corrosive influence of the skeptical world, which always seeks to measure the infinite by the yardstick of the finite, but the master of the mind knows that the invisible things are truth today. As the resonance becomes an unbreakable shield, the seeker finds that their very presence begins to alter the atmosphere of any room they enter, as if the air itself were being rearranged to accommodate the frequency of a sovereign being who knows their own worth and their own power to command the atoms of the universe for the work in the light now. This expansion leads to the realization that the subconscious mind is the great executive of the soul, which takes the plans of the architect and coordinates the vast and complex movements of the cosmic intelligence to ensure that every detail of the vision is brought into the light of day with the precision of a master clockmaker in the world today. The individual no longer sees themselves as a separate entity struggling against an indifferent world, but as the very heartbeat of the world itself expressing its glory through the unique channel of their own personality, and the harmonics merge with the song of the stars in a perfect union of purpose and power that echoes through the soul now. The architect stands in the center of their own creation and sees that it is good, and that it is true, and that it is the direct reflection of the love and the light they have dared to claim as their own in the silence of the deep. The work is finished, and the resonance of the eternal spirit is the final and only truth for the radiant soul today. Chapter 3. The Architecture of the Eternal Now. The progression of the internal journey leads us inevitably to the mastery of time, and the understanding that the past and the future are merely mental constructs that have no power over the radiant intensity of the present moment, where all creative action takes place. And as we enter this third stage of our transformation, the architect must learn to collapse the distance for the spirit now. The architect recognizes that in the realm of the subconscious mind, there is no such thing as waiting or delay, because the deep mind exists in a state of perpetual immediacy, and therefore any command given to it with the feeling of future fulfillment is interpreted as a statement of current lack, which only serves to perpetuate the state of wanting for the soul today. To master the architecture of the eternal, now one must develop the ability to live from the end rather than thinking of the end, which means that the seeker must inhabit the mental and emotional atmosphere of their goal, as if it were already a physical fact of their environment. And this practice requires a complete surrender of the sensory evidence in the world today. The architect knows that the gap is an illusion created by the limitations of the physical eyes, which can only see the shadows of thoughts that have already been thought, and cannot yet perceive the light of the thoughts that are currently being formed in the sanctuary of the spirit. And as the listener sinks into this profound realization, they find peace for the soul now. The anxiety of the struggle is replaced by the calm assurance of the one who has already arrived at their destination. And this state of being is the most powerful magnet in the universe, because it radiates a frequency of completion that compels the outer world to rearrange its atoms to match the inner reality with the precision of a mathematical law today. We must understand that the subconscious mind does not understand the concept of tomorrow or yesterday, but only the vibration of the word I am, which is the name of the creative power within every human soul. And when the individual says, I am wealthy or successful with conviction, they are delivering a blueprint to the internal builder for the all now. As the third chapter expands, we explore the technique of mental time travel, where the architect looks back from the vantage point of their future success and sees the current moment not as a problem to be solved, but as a necessary and already completed step in the grand design of their life. And this shift in perspective removes the ego in the world today. This shift allows the life force to flow through the individual with a vitality and a clarity that was previously blocked by the heavy walls of doubt and the false belief in a linear progression of effort and reward. And the seeker begins to see that they are the master of the clock and the architect of the calendar for the work in the light now. The seeker can compress years of progress into weeks of manifestation by the sheer intensity of their focus and the depth of their resonance with the eternal now, where all possibilities exist simultaneously as a vast ocean of potential waiting to be claimed by the one who has the courage to touch the divine garment in the world of the spirit today. As this understanding becomes integrated into the very fabric of the soul, the individual finds that they no longer move through the world as a victim of circumstances, but as a sovereign ruler who commands the flow of events with the quiet authority of a king, and the external world begins to reflect this new status with a beautiful consistency now. Opportunities appear out of thin air, and obstacles dissolve like mist in the morning sun. And the architect realizes that the secret of the ages is not a hidden formula, but the simple and direct application of the law of assumption, where the feeling of the wish fulfilled is maintained with such fidelity that the world must bow to the creative will today. The story of the mind continues to ascend toward the heights of the spirit, where the distinction between the dreamer and the dream is finally lost in the radiance of the eternal now, which is the only home of the soul and the only source of the power that creates and sustains the stars and the galaxies in a single breath of infinite love for the all now. The end of this chapter is the beginning of a life that is no longer measured by the ticking of the clock, but by the expansion of the heart and the glory of the light that shines forever in the secret place of the Most High, where the architect and the creator are found to be one in the silence of the now. The expansion reveals the interval today. The untrained mind perceives the interval as a period of waiting where nothing is happening, but the master of the eternal now knows that the interval is actually a period of intense activity in the invisible realms, where the subconscious is weaving the complex threads of causality to bring the vision to life for the work in the radiant spirit now. The third chapter requires the development of a divine patience that is not based on hoping for a future result, but on the absolute certainty of a present possession, which allows the seeker to remain unmoved by the silence of the outer world, while the inner world is shouting the joy of completion. And as the listener integrates this for the all today, the very concept of a deadline becomes a tool rather than a threat, because they are no longer working against time, but are working with the substance of eternity to manifest the highest good in the perfect sequence of events. And the architect begins to utilize the power of the present moment to revise the past by breathing new meaning into the soul now. The architect rewrites the entire trajectory of the soul through the corridors of time, and as this internal reconstruction reaches its peak, individual realizes that the eternal now is the only place where the power of the infinite can be accessed, and that by leaning into the future, they are leaking energy in the world of the spirit today. The final lesson of this stage is the total immersion in the richness of the here and now, where every task is a sacred ritual, and every breath is an affirmation of the creative spirit that lives and moves through the individual with a grace and a power that is truly beyond measure as the story continues its expansion through the gates now. The architect begins to recognize that the eternal now is not a static point, but a dynamic vortex of creative potential that remains unaffected by the shadows of age or the decay of the material world, and by anchoring the consciousness in this center, the seeker effectively steps out of the stream of collective entropy and into light today. The state of perpetual renewal is where the body and the environment are constantly refreshed by the influx of pure unconditioned energy from the source, and this requires the listener to cultivate a profound mental stillness that can coexist with the most intense outward activity, where the core of the being remains as calm as the storm now. The eye of the hurricane remains calm, while the manifestations of the mind whirl into existence in the physical realm. And we must understand that every moment of doubt is an attempt by the ego to reintroduce the concept of linear time and the fear of delayed results. But the master simply smiles at these phantoms in the world today. The master returns their attention to the feeling of having already received, which is the only frequency that the subconscious recognizes as a command to act. And as this practice matures, the seeker finds that the time between thought and thing begins to shrink until the two become almost simultaneous in a state of high vibration now. The word and the deed are one and the same, and this is the true meaning of spiritual maturity, where the individual no longer prays for things to happen in the future, but speaks from the conviction that all things are already provided in the richness of the infinite now. The architect uses this power to heal the wounds of the soul today. The seeker builds bridges of opportunity across the perceived gaps in their experience, realizing that there is no distance to be traveled and no mountain to be climbed, because the destination is always within, and the prize is always present in the heart that knows how to claim its own in the silence of the sanctuary of the radiant spirit now. The story of the mind reaches a level of sublime clarity where the walls of the world become transparent, and the light of the eternal now shines through every event and every encounter, revealing the hidden perfection that has always been there waiting to be acknowledged by the eye of the one who has transcended the illusion today. As this chapter reaches its conclusion, the listener is prepared to step into the fourth dimension of consciousness, where the laws of the physical world are seen as mere suggestions, and the power of the sovereign spirit is the only reality that remains in the silence of the absolute for the all in the light of the radiant heart now. Chapter 4. The dimensional shift of the sovereign spirit. As the internal architect masters the rhythm of the eternal, now the journey naturally progresses into the fourth dimension of consciousness, where the soul moves beyond the three-dimensional limits of length, breadth, and height to enter the realm of pure causation, where thought and effect are seen as a single unified movement of the spirit today. In this fourth chapter, we explore the capacity of the mind to transcend the physical laws by recognizing that the physical universe is merely the terminal end of a spiritual process that begins in the unseen depths of the sovereign self, and the seeker must now learn to operate as a dweller in two worlds, simultaneously maintaining a physical presence now. The primary consciousness remains anchored in the dimensional reality of the imagination, where all things are already complete and all desires are already realized as facts of the spirit. And to achieve this dimensional shift, one must develop the ability to see through the appearance of solid matter and recognize that everything is a fluid projection for the soul today. The walls that seem to block our path and the obstacles that seem to hinder our progress are nothing more than mental shadows that can be dissolved by the light of a higher awareness. And as the listener absorbs this profound truth, they find that their sense of personal power expands to encompass the entire field of their experience in the world now. The seeker stops trying to manipulate the external world through physical force and starts to rearrange the internal world through the power of spiritual command. And this shift in perspective is the most radical transition in the history of the human soul, because it marks the end of the age of struggle and the beginning of the age of manifestation today. The individual walks through life with the quiet confidence of a God, knowing that their word is the law of their world, and that the universe has no choice but to follow the instructions that are issued from the throne of the heart. And as we delve into the mechanics of this dimensional reality, we find the subconscious mind acts as the portal now. The architect must learn to keep this portal clear of any debris of doubt or any fragments of the old identity that might distort the transmission of the higher light, and this requires a level of mental purity that is achieved through the constant contemplation of the divine attributes of abundance and health and joy until the mind is a mirror today. As the chapter unfolds, the seeker discovers that they can use the power of the dimensional shift to heal not only themselves, but also the world around them by seeing the perfection that exists behind every mask of suffering, and by calling forth the hidden truth that lies dormant in every heart that has forgotten its own origin for the spirit now. The architect becomes a channel for the transformation of the planet as they radiate the frequency of the sovereign spirit into the collective consciousness, breaking the chains of fear and the bonds of limitation for everyone who comes into contact with their light, and this leads to a state of absolute freedom, subject only to the law of love today. The story of the mind reaches its highest peak of intensity as the architect realizes that they are the very bridge between the finite and the infinite, and that their life is the canvas upon which the Creator is painting its most magnificent masterpiece. Through the unique colors of their own personality and the integration of the divine now, the self is found to be the source, and the source is found to be the self in a union that transcends all words and all concepts and all boundaries, leaving only the radiant presence of the one who is and who was, and who will forever be the master of their own destiny in the silence of the absolute and the victory of the mind over matter today. As the fourth chapter reaches its conclusion, the listener is invited to live from the heights of their own spiritual authority, knowing that the world of shadows has no power over the light of the sovereign spirit which shines forever, with the intensity of 1,000 suns in the secret place of the heart, in the victory of the spirit now. Moving further into the mechanics of this dimensional shift, the architect begins to perceive that the physical senses are not windows into reality, but filters that limit the vast spectrum of the infinite to a narrow band of human experience. And as the fourth chapter expands, the listener is challenged to withdraw the authority of the flesh today. The seeker relies entirely on the spiritual sight of the imagination, which possesses the power to see the end from the beginning and to perceive the hidden structures of wealth and health that exist within the fourth dimensional blueprint long before they appear in the three-dimensional shadow world, and this requires a profound mental density now. The chosen vision is held with such weight and such vividness that the external world begins to seem transparent and ephemeral in comparison to the solid truth of the inner state, and the architect understands that any reaction to the current physical environment is a retreat back into the three-dimensional prison for the spirit in the light today. To react is to acknowledge that the shadow has power over the light, but the sovereign spirit does not react. It only acts through the continuous broadcasting of its own self-determined frequency. And as this mastery over reaction is achieved, the seeker finds that the time lag between the inner command and the outer manifestation begins to fade now. The consciousness is no longer divided between what is seen and what is felt, and this unification of awareness is the secret of the miraculous, where the laws of nature appear to be suspended, but are actually being superseded by the higher laws of the spiritual dimension, which are always in operation for the one who knows the silence today. The architect begins to utilize the dimensional shift to navigate the multiple timelines of possibility that exist within the quantum field, choosing the path that aligns with the highest glory of the soul and discarding all other versions of the self as irrelevant ghosts of a forgotten past in the sanctuary of the silent mind for the all now. As the story of the mind reaches its final levels of complexity, the individual realizes that they are not a separate drop in the ocean, but the entire ocean in a single drop, and that every thought they think and every emotion they feel sends a shockwave through the entire fabric of Va, existence altering the course of the stars in the world today. The listener is urged to take up the mantle of this responsibility with a heart full of love and a mind full of light, knowing that they are the light of the world, and that their success is the success of the infinite, and their joy is the joy of the Creator who finds fulfillment through the expansion of its own being in the spirit now. As the fourth chapter continues to unfold the final secrets of the sovereign power, lead the way into the ultimate realization of the Absolute, where all shifts are completed and all dimensions are merged into the singular radiance of the One who has finally returned home to the throne of their own consciousness in the radiant light today. Entering the final layers of this dimensional expansion, the architect discovers that the bridge between the seen and the unseen is constructed through the quality of attention, which acts as the gravitational force that pulls the fourth dimensional reality into the three-dimensional field of perception for the work in the light now. This requires the listener to cultivate a state of selective blindness where the mind deliberately ignores the static of current limitations to focus exclusively on the high-definition clarity of the spiritual goal until the subconscious is so saturated with the new data that it has no choice but to project it into the physical realm today. The sovereign spirit does not seek for things to happen, but recognizes that all things have already happened in the mind of the infinite, and the only task is to align the personal frequency with the already completed success that is waiting in the wings of the dimensional stage for its cue to enter the light of day for the soul now. The architect becomes a master of the invisible flow, learning to sense the subtle shifts in the energetic tides and knowing exactly when to speak the word of power and when to rest in the silence of absolute certainty while the gears of the cosmos grind in their favor behind the veil of the mundane world in the sanctuary of the spirit today. This transition marks the death of the old self that was bound by the rules of cause and effect, and the birth of the new self that is the cause of all its own effects, through the conscious direction of the divine spark that burns at the center of the soul, and the listener is encouraged to embrace the weight of this sovereignty now. The power that creates the vision is the same power that provides the means for its manifestation, and there is no lack in the fourth dimension, and no failure in the heart of the one who knows that they are the very consciousness that gives life to the universe. And as the narrative reaches its summit, the boundaries fade into light today. The dream is the dreamer, and the word is the flesh, and the life is the light of the sovereign spirit shining through the darkness of the ages to reveal the path of glory that has always been open to the one who dares to step through the gate of the mind and into the vastness of the absolute in every breath of the eternal now. Chapter 5. The Alchemy of the Divine Will. The journey through the internal corridors of the mind now brings the seeker to the supreme stage of the alchemy of the divine will, where the individual consciousness merges with the universal current to transform the leaden weight of human limitation into the pure gold of spiritual sovereignty. And in this fifth chapter, we explore the ultimate refinement today. The architect no longer merely asks or suggests, but commands the substance of life through the realization that their will is not a separate or isolated force, but a localized expression of the same will that launched the galaxies and sustains the breath of every living thing. And to master this alchemy, one must first dissolve the false belief for the soul now. As long as the mind believes in obstacles or enemies or external fate, it remains divided and weakened by the friction of its own doubt. But when the mind, sovereign spirit, recognizes that there is only one power, and that power is the very essence of their own being, the friction disappears, and the will becomes a sharp and effortless instrument of the world today. The will carves through the resistance of the material world like a blade through silk, and this level of mastery requires a total purification of the motive. Behind the command, where the architect moves beyond the petty desires of the ego and aligns their vision with the expansive nature of the infinite, which always seeks to express more life and more beauty now. As the listener absorbs the frequency of this higher alignment, they find that their personal goals are no longer a struggle to achieve, but a natural unfolding of a cosmic pattern that is supported by the entire weight of the universe. And the alchemy of the will begins with the silence of the heart, where the noisy demands are hushed for the spirit today. In this silence, the architect drafts the blueprints of a reality that transcends the highest expectations of the previous self, and as the chapter expands, we delve into the practice of spiritual radiation, where the seeker learns to project their will not as a forceful push against the world, but as a radiant glow that emanates from the center of being now. The radiant glow illuminates the path ahead, so that every person and every event is naturally drawn into the orbit of the new manifestation. And this is the secret of the effortless life, where the individual becomes the sun of their own solar system, and everything else moves in perfect harmony with the central light of their conviction today. The alchemy of the will also involves the transmutation of the senses, where the eyes no longer report what is lacking, but see the hidden wealth that is already present, and the ears no longer hear the whispers of failure, but listen to the music of the spheres that celebrates the eternal victory of the light. And as this shift becomes permanent now, the subconscious mind is flooded with a constant stream of high-octave data that compels it to build a physical experience of unparalleled grandeur and majesty, and the architect realizes that they are the master of the laboratory of the soul, where every thought is a chemical element, and every emotion is a catalyst for the work in the world today. The boundaries of the self continue to dissolve into the vastness of the absolute, and the listener is urged to take up the mantle of their own divinity with a heart that knows no fear and a mind that knows no limits, because the power of the divine will is the only true power in the universe, and it is yours to command for the soul now. The alchemy of the spirit leads the way toward the ultimate realization of the sovereign self. Expanding further into this alchemical process, the architect must understand that the divine will operates through the law of non-resistance, which means that any attempt to fight against current conditions only serves to anchor them in the world today. The subconscious interprets the energy of struggle as a confirmation of the reality of the problem, and therefore the master of the alchemy of the will learns to turn their back on the appearance of evil or lack, and to focus with a singular intensity on the ideal state until the ideal becomes more real than the shadow for the spirit now. This is the highest form of spiritual warfare, where the only weapon is the unwavering attention on the good, and the only strategy is the persistent feeling of the wish fulfilled, which eventually starves the old reality of the life force it needs to survive, and the listener begins to experience a profound sense of liberation in the world today. The architect finds that as they change their own will to match the divine will, the world around them begins to reorganize itself with an effortless grace that defies the logic of the waking mind, and the coincidences become more frequent, and the doors of opportunity open before they are even knocked upon for the all in the light now. We explore the concept of the spiritual vacuum, where the architect deliberately lets go of everything that no longer serves the higher vision to create a space that the infinite is compelled by its own nature to fill with something greater, and this act of letting go is the ultimate expression of the divine will in the world today. Letting go demonstrates an absolute trust in the laws of the universe and a total abandonment of the fear of lack, and the seeker finds that in the emptiness they have created, the new reality rushes in with a speed and a power that is truly breathtaking to behold, and the alchemy of the will reaches its peak of perfection for the soul now. The individual no longer feels like they are the one doing the work, but realizes that the work is being done through them by the power of the infinite, and they become a spectator of their own magnificent manifestation, watching with joy and gratitude as the vision held in the silence becomes a solid and beautiful reality in the world today. The story of the mind continues to ascend toward the heights of the Absolute, where all shifts are completed and all desires are realized, and the sovereign spirit stands in the center of its own creation, as a testament to the glory of the light that never fails and the love that never ends in the eternal now of the infinite for the spirit now. The architect discovers that the true secret of the alchemical transformation is the infusion of love into every command, because love is the cohesive force of the universe that binds the vision to its physical counterpart, and without love the will is a cold and sterile instrument, but with love the will becomes a living power today. Love nurtures the seeds of desire into the full bloom of manifestation, and the seeker must learn to love their vision as if it were a living being, and to love the process of its creation, and even to love the current shadows for the lessons they have provided. And this saturation of the heart acts as a universal solvent for the soul now. The frequency of love dissolves the last remnants of the ego and the last barriers to the infinite supply, and this listener finds that as they walk in the spirit of love, they become invulnerable to the arrows of the world and the doubts of the crowd, because they are anchored in the highest frequency of existence in the world today. The alchemy of the will leads the architect to the realization that they are the very breath of the Creator moving through the world to bring order out of chaos and light out of darkness, and that every action they take is a sacred movement in the grand symphony of the cosmos, and the story of the mind reaches sublime beauty now. The architect stands as a beacon of light for all of humanity, showing the way back to the kingdom within, where the treasure is stored, and the master is found, and the life is lived in the fullness of the eternal, now as the final echoes of the alchemy resonate through the halls of the spirit and into the heart of the infinite today. Moving even deeper into the structural layers of this alchemical mastery, the architect recognizes that the divine will is not a force that is summoned from the outside, but a spring that is released from within through the act of total self-acceptance, and the realization that the individual is already perfect in the world for the all now. This shift in perception removes the last traces of the need to improve the self or to earn the favor of a distant deity, and allows the power of the infinite to flow through the channel of the personality without any obstruction or delay, and the seeker finds that as they stop trying to be something, they start being the spirit today. The alchemy of the will becomes a quiet and effortless conversation between the soul and its source, where the architect speaks the word, and the universe provides the echo in the form of physical reality. And as this chapter of the journey reaches its grand conclusion, the listener is prepared to step into the final stages for the soul now. The mind and the matter and the spirit are all revealed to be one and the same in the radiance of the sovereign self, and the alchemy is completed in the fire of the divine love that burns forever at the center of the heart, and the light of the internal architect shines through the darkness to reveal a new world in the light today. The story of the mind continues its infinite expansion through the gates of the Absolute and into the heart of the glory that knows no end and no beginning, but only the eternal presence of the one who knows, and who feels, and who is the master of all things in the silence of the deep. The divine will is a focused decree for the all now. The true alchemy occurs when the individual stops trying to force circumstances and instead begins to occupy the state of being that is, naturally followed by those circumstances like a shadow follows a body in the light of the sun, and this requires a radical mental discipline, where the seeker refuses to give life to ghosts today. The seeker pours every drop of emotional energy into the furnace of the internal vision until the heat of that vision becomes so intense that it melts the very structure of the material world and allows the new reality to be cast in the mold of the divine intention, and the architect understands that the will is power in the soul now. The architect realizes the silent command of the spirit is the whisper that moves mountains and parts the seas, because it is backed by the absolute certainty of the source, which knows no resistance and no opposition in the vastness of the infinite. And as this alchemical process reaches its peak, the seeker feels the infinite today. The personal will and the divine will are so perfectly synchronized that every thought is a prophecy, and every desire is a roadmap to a destination that has already been reached in the secret places of the soul, and the listener finds that they no longer have to plan the details or worry about the timing for the all-now. The intelligence that created the vision also possesses the perfect script for its manifestation, and the only task is to remain in a state of high vibration and joyful expectation as the scenes of the new life unfold with a grace and a majesty that far exceed the limited dreams of the old self in the sanctuary of the spirit today. This is the true birthright of the sovereign spirit, to walk the earth as a master of the elements and a creator of the formless into the formed using the alchemy of the will to bring heaven down to earth and to reveal the hidden glory of the infinite in every mundane moment of the mean human experience for the soul now. Moving further into the depths of this internal expansion, the architect must address the concept of the sacred vacuum, which is the space created when the soul deliberately releases its grip on the familiar shores of the past to venture into the unknown waters of the infinite potential in the sanctuary of the light today. The universe abhors a vacuum and is compelled by its own nature to rush in and fill the empty space with a higher and more radiant expression of life than was previously possible, and the listener is encouraged to embrace the periods of silence and the moments of apparent emptiness as the most productive stages for the spirit now. Unseen forces are busy at work, rearranging the atoms of the environment to accommodate the grandeur of the new command, and this requires a level of faith that is not a blind hope, but a scientific certainty based on the understanding of spiritual laws that have never failed and can never fail the one who knows today. The architect becomes a master of the pause, knowing that the stillness is the precursor to the greatest movements of the spirit, and that the dark of the night is simply the womb of the coming dawn, where the new world is being formed in the secret sanctuary of the eternal now. The divine will is the pulse of the blood for the soul now. As the story of the mind expands, the seeker is invited to consider the impact of their alchemical work on the collective consciousness of humanity, because the rise of a single sovereign spirit acts as a leaven that lifts the frequency of the entire world, and the architect realizes that their success is a gift to the world today. By demonstrating the power of the divine will in their own life, they become a living testament to the truth that every human being has the same access to the same infinite supply and the same creative power if they only dare to look within and claim their own divinity. And the alchemy of the will becomes a mission for the soul now. The seeker finds that their power increases tenfold because it is now backed by the intention of the whole to bless the parts, and then the universe pours its treasures into the hands of the one who intends to use them for the expansion of good in every direction. And the journey continues into the heart of the glory today. The architect stands at the threshold of the final mysteries with a heart that is wide open and a mind that is crystal clear and a will that is as strong as the diamond and as flexible as the water, ready to dive into the absolute depths of the spirit where the last boundaries of the ego are dissolved in the light for the all now. The final echoes of the divine alchemy resonate through the halls of the spirit and into the heart of the infinite, forever and ever in the eternal expansion of the one who knows how to will and how to love and how to be master of their own universe in the fullness of the light. The work is finished for the radiant soul today. Chapter 6. The Radiance of the Etheric Coupling. The progression of the internal architect now reaches the profound stage of etheric coupling, where the individual consciousness learns to fuse its refined will with the subtle substance of the universal ether to create a bridge between the world of pure potential and the world of physical effect. And in this sixth chapter we explore the mastery of the invisible threads for the soul today. We recognize that the space between objects is not an empty void, but a highly charged field of intelligent energy that acts as the conductor for every thought and every emotion issued by the sovereign spirit. And to master this coupling, one must first develop a sensitivity to the subtle movements of the internal climate. Learning to detect the moment of thought becomes a vibration for the light now. The architect understands that they are not a separate observer, looking at a distant world, but a vital participant in a continuous exchange of energy, where the internal state is constantly being mirrored by the etheric field in a magnificent display of cosmic feedback, and this realization requires the seeker to cultivate a state of intense mental focus in the world of the spirit today. The attention is no longer scattered among 1,000 different distractions, but is gathered into a single point of radiant power that can penetrate the veil of the material world to touch the very source of all creation. And as the listener sinks into this understanding, they find that their ability to influence the flow of events increases proportionally to the silence for the soul now. The ether responds most readily to the mind that is still and the heart that is certain, and the alchemy of the previous chapters now matures into a practical science of spiritual engineering, where the architect uses the tools of imagery and feeling to construct etheric blueprints that are so detailed and so vibrant that the physical world has no choice but to obey the light today. This process of coupling is the secret behind all truly great achievements in human history, where the vision of a single individual was held with such intensity that it eventually forced the atoms of the universe to align in its favor. And as the chapter expands, we delve into the concept of the mental atmospheric pressure, where the individual learns to saturate the soul now. The individual saturates their internal environment with the frequency of their desired success until the pressure of the inner world becomes so much greater than the outer world that the manifestation is pushed into physical existence by the sheer weight of its own spiritual reality, and the seeker begins to see that they are the master of the unseen forces today. The laws of physics are merely the habits of the collective mind that can be overridden by the higher laws of the individual spirit when it is fully awakened to its own divine heritage. Expanding further into the dynamics of etheric coupling, the architect discovers that the quality of their interactions is determined by the energetic signature they carry now. This signature is the sum total of every thought held in the silence and every emotion felt in the darkness of the heart, and as the seeker learns to consciously curate this signature, they find that the world begins to respond to them with a new level of cooperation and grace, as if the very elements were conspiring to ensure their success in the world today. This requires the listener to take total responsibility for their internal state, refusing to blame the environment or the actions of others for any lack of harmony in their experience, and instead returning again and again to the center of their own power to realign the internal broadcast with the frequency of the infinite. And the architect is a master now. The master senses the subtle shifts in the etheric tides and knows exactly when to act and when to remain still while the great machinery of the cosmos grinds in their favor behind the scenes of the mundane world. And this transition marks the point where the individual ceases to be a victim of circumstances and becomes the architect of their destiny today. The conscious application of the laws of resonance and coupling ensure that every seed of desire planted in the fertile soil of the subconscious is brought to full fruition in the perfect time and the perfect way, and the story of the mind reaches a level of sublime complexity as the boundaries between the internal and the external continue to fade now. A singular point of radiant light emerges where the self and the world are seen as one and the same movement of the spirit, and the listener is urged to embrace the vastness of this connection with a heart that is wide open and a mind that is crystal clear, knowing that they are the very consciousness that gives life to the universe and joy to the Creator today. As the 6th chapter continues to unfold, the final secrets of the etheric coupling lead the way toward the ultimate realization. of the sovereign self in the heart of the infinite, and as the architecture of the spirit continues to grow, the seeker is invited to consider the impact of their internal work on the wider field of human potential for the soul now. The mastery of the etheric coupling is not merely a personal achievement, but a collective service that opens the way for others to discover their own power, and the architect realizes that by maintaining a high frequency of peace and abundance, they are effectively creating a sanctuary of light in the midst of the world darkness for the spirit in the light today. This realization brings a new sense of purpose to the daily practice of mental discipline, as the individual understands that their internal work is the most effective form of activism they can perform on behalf of a planet that is crying out for a new way of being, and the coupling of the individual will with the universal ether becomes a mission now. The individual becomes a conduit for the divine grace to flow into the world of form, to bless and to build and to create a new earth based on the principles of harmony and light. And as the narrative of the mind reaches its summit, the listener is prepared to step into the final stages of the great work, where the mind and the matter are seen as one today. The architect stands in the center of their own creation as a sovereign being who knows no limits and no boundaries. Only the eternal expansion of the soul in the light of the absolute, and the end of the 6th chapter is the beginning of a life that is no longer lived in the shadows of doubt, but in the radiance of the sovereign spirit which shines for the all now. The light shines forever with the intensity of 1,000 suns in the secret place of the heart, where the journey began and where the journey ends in the eternal victory of the mind over the world. Moving even deeper into the structural layers of this etheric mastery, the architect recognizes that the most potent form of coupling occurs in total surrender today. The individual mind ceases its frantic efforts and allows the universal intelligence to take the lead, and this surrender is not a sign of weakness, but the ultimate expression of strength, because it demonstrates a complete trust in the underlying laws of the universe, and a total abandonment of the ego need to control the outcome for the radiant soul now. The seeker finds that in this state of holy passivity, the manifestations occur with a speed and a precision that was previously impossible, and the life becomes a living demonstration of the power of the silence and the majesty of the Word made flesh through the medium of the ether. And as this chapter of the journey reaches its grand conclusion today, the listener is prepared to step into the ultimate mystery of the self, where the last vestiges of the separate identity are dissolved in the radiance of the absolute, and the architect is revealed as the very consciousness that sustains the stars and the galaxies in the eternal dance of creation that never sleeps and never fails to respond to the call now. The light of the internal architect shines through the darkness to reveal a world that is made of beauty and power and love in the fullness of the eternal. Now, as the story of the mind continues its infinite expansion through the gates of the spirit and into the heart of the glory that knows no end and no beginning, but only the sovereign self today. As the resonance of the etheric coupling continues to saturate the atmosphere of the soul, the architect finds that the very nature of their reality begins to shift as the old laws of struggle and effort are replaced by the higher laws of flow and grace, and the individual no longer feels like they are pushing against a resistant world for the soul now. The master is carried by a magnificent current of divine purpose that knows exactly where it is going and how to get there, and this shift in momentum is the hallmark of the master, who has successfully coupled their personal desire with the universal power, and the listener is encouraged to remain in this state of fluid expectancy in the world today. Every need is provided for, and every path is prepared before they even take a step, and the architect uses this power to weave a tapestry of life that is rich in meaning and abundant in every form of good, realizing that the only limit to their experience is the limit of their own imagination. And as the 6th chapter reaches its final state of perfection now, the seeker stands as a testament to the truth that the mind is the only cause and the world is the only effect, and that the one who masters the internal world is the undisputed ruler of the external world in every moment of the eternal, now, and the light of the ally. Sovereign Spirit continues to expand until it encompasses all things in the world today. The expansion of this etheric mastery deepens as the architect begins to perceive the invisible lattice of light that connects the subjective dream to the objective reality, recognizing that the ether acts as a perfect mirror, reflecting with mathematical certainty the exact density and quality of the internal image for the sanctuary of the spirit now. The seeker must move beyond the mere visualization of objects and begin to command the very atmosphere of their existence, saturating the space around them with a specialized energetic presence that compels the environment to conform to the sovereign decree in this final stretch of the 6th chapter as we explore spiritual contagion in the world today. The etheric coupling becomes so potent that the architect no longer needs to speak or act to influence the world, as their very presence becomes a transformative force that aligns the atoms of the room in the hearts of men to the frequency of the divine vision. And this requires the listener to maintain a level of internal integrity for the all now. No stray vibration of fear or resentment is allowed to leak into the etheric field, for the ether does not judge the quality of the seed. It only ensures the growth of whatever is planted with the most emotional intensity. And as the story of the mind reaches this high water mark of sophistication, the architect discovers the power of wake today. The desired reality is held in the consciousness with such gravimetric force that it literally bends the fabric of the three-dimensional world to accommodate its arrival, and the seeker finds that they are no longer waiting for the future, but are actively pulling the future into the present through the magnetic pull of their conviction for the soul now. This mastery allows the individual to navigate the complexities of human life with an eerie and beautiful precision as they learn to read the subtle ripples in the etheric field, can adjust their internal dial before the external storm even begins to form, and the life of the architect thus becomes a masterpiece of synchronization in the world today. Every encounter is a divine appointment, and every delay is revealed to be a hidden protection as the universal intelligence coordinates the vast movements of the cosmos to fulfill the blueprint drawn in the silence of the soul. And the final realization of the etheric coupling is the understanding that the self is not the body or the ego now. The self is the field through which all things move, and by identifying with the field, the architect attains a state of invulnerability and infinite supply, and the listener is urged to stand tall in this new awareness, recognizing that the power cultivated is an eternal attribute of their own divine nature, which is now fully awakened and ready today. The sovereign spirit reigns over the world of form with love and wisdom, and as the 6th chapter concludes, the light shines with a brilliance that dissolves the last shadows of the old world, leaving only the radiant reality of the one who has mastered the harmonics of the deep and the architecture of the now in the sanctuary of the spirit now. The journey stands at the threshold of the ultimate revelation, where the mind and the ether are seen as a single undivided flame of wine, eternal life burning forever at the heart of the Absolute, ready to ignite the final fires of total transformation and the integration of this etheric mastery leads to the psychic resonance chamber today. The internal world becomes so dense with intention that it begins to pulse with a life of its own, independent of the conscious effort of the seeker. And at this stage of the 6th chapter, we realize that the coupling is not merely a bridge we cross, but a state of being we inhabit, where the boundary between the dreamer and dream is gone now. The spirit can reach through the veil and rearrange reality with a single breath of conviction, and the listener must understand that the ether is a living substance that craves direction, and when it encounters a mind that is unified and a will that is absolute, it rushes to obey with a ferocity that the unawakened world calls a miracle today. The master knows this to be the natural fulfillment of spiritual law, and this requires the architect to refine their internal language, moving away from the Yahweh vocabulary of becoming and into the absolute grammar of, is for the etheric field only responds to the present tense vibration of a soul that has already claimed its throne for the all now. As the narrative of the mind expands, the architect begins to utilize the power of etheric projection to prepave the paths of their future endeavors, sending out waves of specialized resonance into the weeks and months ahead to ensure that every door is already open and every heart is already prepared before the physical self even arrives today. This is the true mark of the sovereign spirit, the ability to exist in multiple points of the etheric lattice, simultaneously anchoring the light of the source in every corner of their experience, so that there is no space left for the shadows of lack or the ghosts of failure to congregate, and the seeker finds that life is divine intelligence now. The internal command and the external response are no longer two separate events, but a singular instantaneous explosion of creative power in this high frequency. Existence demands a total commitment to the purity of the inner vision, for, in the fourth dimension of the ether, every thought is a seed that germinates with lightning speed today. The master knows that to maintain the garden of their life, they must be the vigilant guardian of the gates of their own mind, and the final crescendo reveals that the etheric coupling is the ultimate reconciliation of the human and the divine with a wine. Individual realizes that their personal imagination is the workshop of the infinite for the soul now. In this state of sublime union, the architect no longer feels the need to search for the light, because they have become the light, and their every movement is a radiation of the glory that has always resided at the center of their being, and the listener is invited to rest in this profound certainty, letting go of the last vestiges of struggle today. The magnificent current of the universal ether carries them into the next stage of their evolution, and the story of the mind has now reached a point of no return, where the old world of shadows has been entirely replaced by a radiant architecture of light, and the sovereign spirit stands ready to unveil the final mysteries in the world now. The architect sees with the eyes of the soul that the work is finished, the victory is won, and the light of the sovereign self is the only reality that remains in the eternal, now just for a few moments, but for eternity, and this realization of the infinite self is the final key to the etheric coupling as the seeker understands the power today. A power wielded is not a personal possession, but a universal inheritance that flows through them as naturally as the light flows from the sun, and the architect now sees that the world is a fluid and plastic substance that responds to the slightest touch of the spirit by maintaining the purity of their inner vision in the sanctuary now. The architect creates a masterpiece of life that is a direct reflection of the beauty and the majesty of the source and the journey of the Charis. Mind has now moved beyond the realm of theory and into the realm of absolute experience, where the word and the deed are one, and the dreamer and the dream are unified in the radiance of the eternal now today. The master of the sixth chapter learns to navigate the collective ether without being influenced by its lower frequencies of fear and lack, instead acting as a purifying fire that neutralizes the static of the world through the intensity of their own sovereign light. And this is the stage of spiritual leadership for the radiant soul now. By holding the high frequency of the divine will in the face of all worldly evidence, the seeker becomes a stabilizer for the planet and an anchor of light in a sea of shifting shadows, ensuring that the architecture of the new world is built upon the solid rock of spiritual truth, rather, and the shifting sands of human opinion in the world today. The listener is urged to recognize that this etheric coupling is the ultimate liberation from the laws of the flesh, as it grants the individual the power to rewrite their own history and to predetermine their own future through the conscious selection of the internal state. For the architect finds that they are no longer bound by gravity now. The ether is ever new and responds only to the vibration of the present moment, and by stepping into the radiance of the sovereign spirit, the individual washes away the old identity and emerges as a new creation, fully equipped with the wisdom and the power to command the atoms of their sphere. existence and the final objective of this 6th chapter today. The architect prepares to enter the 7th and most sacred stage of the journey, where the work is completed and the rest is found in the heart of the Absolute. And as the story of the mind reaches its final crescendo, the boundaries of time and space are seen as temporary scaffolding, and the architect stands ready to step into the infinite now. The light of the sovereign self is now so bright that it illuminates the hidden perfection in every circumstance, revealing that there has never been a moment of separation from the source, and never a second where the power was not present. And the 6th chapter ends in a state of profound and wordless gratitude for the spirit in the light today. The architecture of your life is now in your own hands, and with the power of the etheric coupling, you are free to create a reality that is as vast as the stars and as beautiful as the dawn. And the sovereign spirit has found its voice, and that the world is waiting for the next word to be spoken in the silence of the Absolute for the soul now. Chapter 7. The Sabbath of the Sovereign Architect. The ascending path of the internal mind now reaches its most sacred and profound destination in the 7th chapter, where the architect enters the state of spiritual rest known as the Sabbath, which is not a cessation of activity, but the attainment of a state of consciousness where the work is recognized as already finished and the manifestation is accepted as a fact of the spirit now. In this stage of the journey, the seeker moves beyond the effort of visualization and the discipline of coupling to inhabit the absolute stillness of the one who knows that the word has been spoken and the universe must fulfill its decree. And the Sabbath is the ultimate test of the sovereign spirit, because it requires the individual to remain unmoved by the silence today. The seeker must rest in the internal conviction of success, even when the senses report that nothing has changed, and to master this 7th stage, one must develop a divine indifference to the shadows of time and space, recognizing that the delay between the mental command and the physical appearance is merely an illusion of the 3-dimensional perspective for the all-now. The delay has no power over the eternal reality of the soul, and the architect understands that any anxiety or any effort to help the manifestation along is a confession of doubt that only serves to push the goal further away into the future. And therefore, the highest act of creation is the act of letting go and allowing the infinite intelligence to work in the world today. The infinite intelligence coordinates the final details of the physical birth with a precision that far exceeds the capacity of the human ego, and as the listener sinks into this profound rest, they find that their energy is no longer being drained by the struggle to become, but is being replenished by the glory of being, which is the only state for the spirit now. The source recognizes being as a command to multiply, and the 7th chapter explores the depth of this spiritual saturation, where the individual becomes so full of the feeling of the wish fulfilled that there is no room left for any other thought or any other vibration to exist. And this is the true meaning of the temple of the heart in the sanctuary of the spirit today. The master sits on the throne of their own consciousness and surveys the vast landscape of their creation with the quiet joy of a father looking at his child, or a builder looking at the completed cathedral. And the story of the mind reaches its summit of peace as the boundaries between the desire and the possession are completely dissolved in the radiant light now. Expanding into the dimensions of this sacred rest, the architect realizes that the Sabbath is a state of psychological transparency, where the individual no longer filters the light of the source through the lens of personal history or collective limitation, but allows the pure, unconditioned energy of the infinite to flow through the vessel of the soul today. The infinite flows into the world of form without any resistance, and this requires a total surrender of the old identity that was defined by what it lacked or what it was trying to achieve, and the birth of a new identity that is defined only by the richness of its own internal presence. And the seeker finds that in this state they are more powerful for the all now. In this state of holy passivity, they are more powerful than they ever were, during the periods of intense mental labor, because they are now operating as a direct channel for the omnipotence of the Creator, which knows no failure and no opposition in the vastness of the cosmos, and the architect becomes a spectator of the miraculous in the world today. The architect watches with a heart full of gratitude as the people and the circumstances and the opportunities required for the fulfillment of the vision are drawn into their life as if by an invisible magnet of grace. And this is the secret of the effortless manifestation, where the seeker stops hunting for the treasure and realizes the truth now. The seeker realizes that they are the treasure, and that the entire universe is seeking them with the same intensity that they once sought the world. And as the chapter continues to unfold, we see that the Sabbath is not a temporary retreat, but a permanent residence for the soul that has discovered its own divinity in the sanctuary of the Spirit today. The architect learns to carry this internal stillness into the midst of the most busy activities, maintaining a center of gravity that is unshakable, and a light that is inextinguishable by the winds of change. And the story of the mind becomes a testament to the power of the finished work, where the individual stands as a sovereign ruler for the all now. The ruler has already won the victory and is simply waiting for the world to catch up to the reality of their internal triumph. As the architecture of the soul reaches its final state of perfection, the seeker is invited to consider the nature of the Absolute, which is the source and the end of all things, and the ground of the Sabbath in the light today. The architect understands that the Absolute is not a distant goal to be reached, but the very substance of the present moment, which is being shaped and molded by the quality of the internal focus. And by resting in the Absolute, the individual effectively steps out of the stream of causality and into the realm of the first cause for the soul now. The seeker is no longer subject to the laws of the world, but is the one who dictates the laws through the power of their own awareness. And this realization brings a sense of freedom that is beyond description, as the seeker recognizes that they have always been the master of the clock, and that clock, architect of the calendar, in the sanctuary of the Spirit today. The entire story of their life has been a magnificent drama written by their own hand for the purpose of experiencing the glory of their own expansion. And the 7th chapter is the closing of the circle, where the dreamer awakens to find that the dream was real, and that they have the power to dream any world into existence for the Spirit now. Through the alchemy of the will and the radiance of the coupling and the rest of the Sabbath, the listener is urged to abide in this state of total fulfillment, knowing that the journey is over and the work is done, and the light of the Sovereign Spirit is the only thing that remains in the silence of the deep as the final echoes resonate today. The internal genesis resonates through the halls of the Spirit and into the heart of the infinite. Moving further into the structural depths of the Sabbath, the architect realizes that the final barrier to the manifestation was the belief that something had to be done to make it happen. But now, in the clarity of the 7th chapter, they see the all now. The only thing that was ever required was the total acceptance of the reality of the vision in the now. And this acceptance is the supreme act of spiritual authority, which commands the subconscious to project the inner image onto the screen of space without any further delay or interference. And the seeker finds that as they stop, they allow today. The speed of the physical appearance is increased by the depth of the internal relaxation, and the architect becomes a master of the invisible mechanics of the Spirit, learning to trust the silent movements of the etheric field and to remain in the state of joyful expectation, while the universe brings the harvest of the seeds for the soul now. The seeds were planted in the previous chapters, and this is the true meaning of the grace that follows the law, where the individual is rewarded not for their labor, but for their faith, and not for their struggle, but for their surrender to the higher power that lives and moves within them as their very own life in the sanctuary of the Spirit today. The story of the mind reaches a level of sublime simplicity, where the entire complexity of the creative process is condensed into a single point of gratitude, and a single feeling of it is done, and the listener is encouraged to take up their residence in the sanctuary of the finished work, and to never again descend into doubt for the all-now. The seeker remains on the heights of the sovereign spirit, where the view is eternal, and the victory is absolute, and the light of the eternal architect shines forever with the intensity of 1,000 suns in the secret place of the heart, where the journey ends and the life begins in the fullness of the eternal, now in the light today. As the resonance of the Sabbath continues to saturate the atmosphere of the soul, the individual discovers that the rest of the spirit is the most dynamic force in the universe, because it is the state of zero resistance where the infinite can express itself with total freedom, and the architect finds that their presence heals the world now. The architect radiates the frequency of completion and peace, too. Everyone they encounter, and the 7th chapter reveals that the true purpose of the internal architecture was not just to create a better life for the self, but to become a living bridge for the divine to enter the world of form, and to bless all of humanity in the spirit today. The seeker stands in the center of their own creation, and realizes that they are the very love they have been searching for, and the very power they have been trying to claim, and that the entire universe is nothing more than a mirror reflecting the beauty of their own soul in a magnificent symphony of light and sound for the all-now. The individual and the infinite are found to be one in the silence of the Sabbath, and the architect sees that it is good, and that it is true, and that it is the eternal reality of the sovereign self, as the final echoes of the 7th chapter resonate through the spirit and into the heart of the glory that knows no end in the world today. In the final expansion of this sacred rest, the architect perceives that the Sabbath is the eternal state of the source itself, which never strives and never struggles, but eternally projects the universe through the joy of its own being, and by entering the Yen Sabbath, the seeker assumes the natural posture of the Creator for the soul now. The listener must let go of the last remnants of the human concept of time, and understand that the fulfillment of every desire is an eternal fact that is currently being witnessed by the higher self in the radiance of the Absolute, and the architect uses this realization to collapse the remaining shadows of lack in the spirit today. The individual is prepared to live as a sovereign being who no longer seeks for the light because they have become the light, and who no longer waits for the world to change because they are the one who changes the world through the power of their own resonance in the heart of the eternal now. The story is an infinite loop of the spirit now. Every manifestation is a starting point for a new expansion, and every rest is the womb of a greater glory in the silence of the sovereign architect who has finally found their home in the heart of the eternal now. Deepening the essence of this sacred rest, the architect understands the Sabbath is the realization of the fact today. Every seed has already become a tree, and every desire is already a tangible legacy. In this expanded state of the 7th chapter, the seeker learns to master the art of mental stillness, where the mind becomes like a calm lake, perfectly reflecting the sky of the infinite, without a single ripple of how or when to distort the soul now. This rest is the highest form of spiritual work, for it requires the absolute discipline of refusing to give life to the ghosts of the past or the anxieties of the transition, standing instead as a sentry at the gate of the heart to ensure that only the feeling of it is finished is allowed to dwell within the sanctuary of the spirit today. This profound certainty acts as the ultimate anchor in the etheric sea, creating a localized field of such immense gravitational weight that the physical world is literally pulled into alignment with the internal state, manifesting the vision with an effortless precision that leaves the intellectual mind in awe for the all-now. As the narrative of the mind reaches these ultimate heights, the architect discovers that the Sabbath is the realm of the double portion, where the lack of struggle is rewarded with an abundance that far exceeds the results of manual labor or forced manifestation. And the seeker finds that letting go allows the divine to lead today. By letting go of the steering wheel of the ego, they have allowed the cosmic intelligence to take the lead, navigating the ship of their life through the most favorable currents, and into the harbors of the highest success. And the soul is filled with a radiant peace that is the true mark of the one who has mastered the law now. The final expansion of the 7th chapter leads the listener to the realization that the work of the internal architect is never about changing the world, but about changing the self until the world has no choice but to reflect the new internal density. The Sabbath is the permanent residence of the spirit that has arrived today. The soul has claimed its crown, and the mind has found its source. As we dwell in this state of total fulfillment, we see that every chapter of our journey was a necessary movement in the divine symphony of our own evolution, and the architect stands now at the center of a life that is a living masterpiece. In the sanctuary of the spirit now, the journey concludes in the absolute radiance of the sovereign self, where the light is eternal, the power is absolute, and the architect and the architecture are forever one in the silence of the absolute. In this state of perpetual Sabbath, the seeker lives, moves, and has their being as a god among men in the light today. The seeker reveals the hidden treasure of the kingdom to all who have the eyes to see and the heart to believe in the finished work of the Spirit. The light of the sovereign architect shines through every moment, and the architect rests in the glory of the absolute as the journey becomes a celebration of the eternal soul now. Chapter 8. The Multidimensional Harmony of the Source. The architect, having found the stillness of the sacred rest, now ascends to the 8th stage of the internal genesis, which is the realization of multidimensional harmony, where the individual no longer perceives a separation between the high vibrations of the spirit and the dense structures of the material world. And in this chapter, we explore the sovereign mind as a bridge now. The true master does not need to escape the physical world to find the divine, but rather brings the full radiance of the divine into the very fabric of the physical experience. And this multidimensional harmony is the result of a soul that has completely neutralized the conflict between the internal vision and the external observation until both are seen as golden today. The seeker now understands that every atom in their environment is a living extension of their own consciousness, and that by maintaining a state of high octave resonance, they are literally singing the world into a state of perfection and grace. And to master this 8th chapter, one must develop a level of awareness that is both microscopic and macroscopic in the light now. The architect finds that in this state of unified perception, the very concept of difficulty vanishes, because there is no longer a resistant medium to work against, since the world has become as transparent and as responsive as a thought. And as the listener sinks into this profound integration, they find that their personal power has evolved in the world today. The command of the mind is felt across the vast distances of the etheric lattice, triggering responses from sources and individuals that were previously beyond reach. And this is the true meaning of this sovereign spirit acting as a cosmic conductor who coordinates the grand symphony of their own reality with a flick of the internal wrist for the spirit now. Expanding further into the layers of this multidimensional harmony, the architect discovers that the final secret of the great work is the infusion of the absolute into the mundane, where the most simple tasks of daily life are recognized as sacred movements in the dance of the Creator. And this realization strips away the last remnants of the ego today. The seeker sees that the greatest miracle of all is the constant and steady manifestation of a reality that is perfectly tuned to the frequency of love and abundance. And as this chapter grows, we delve into the practice of continuous radiation, where the individual no longer waits for a specific time to meditate, but remains in a creative state for the soul now. The architect becomes a master of the invisible flow, learning to ride the waves of the universal energy with the skill of a seasoned navigator who knows that the wind and the water are not his enemies, but his most faithful allies when he is in harmony with their nature. And the listener is urged to recognize that they are the very center of the spirit today. As the seeker maintains their own peace, they are effectively quieting the storms of the world, and as they maintain their own wealth, they are opening the floodgates of supply for everyone within their sphere of influence, and the story of the mind reaches a level of sublime responsibility where the seeker understands that their life is a portal for the soul now. The architect fulfills the highest purpose of existence, which is the conscious expression of the glory of the Absolute in the theater of time and space. As the resonance of the 8th chapter expands, the architect perceives that the boundaries of the self have dissolved into a state of omnipresence where they are no longer restricted by the world today. This freedom allows the soul to navigate the multiple timelines of the quantum field with a divine ease, selecting the most harmonious path and discarding the shadows of lack with a single glance of truth. And the seeker finds that in this state of multidimensional harmony they can actually feel the response of the universe before the birth for the soul now. This pre-sensory feedback becomes the new compass for the internal architect, who no longer needs the validation of the eyes or the ears, because they have the direct witness of the spirit within, and the architect uses this power to weave a life that is a perfect reflection of the divine attributes of wisdom and power and love in the sanctuary today. The individual realizes that the journey was never about going anywhere, but about becoming aware of where they have always been, which is in the very heart of the infinite, where all things are possible, and all glory is revealed in every moment of the eternal now, and the listener is invited to stand as a pillar of light in the center of the spirit now. Moving deeper into the structural mechanics of this final harmony, the architect recognizes that the will and the rest and the resonance have all merged into a single state of being that can only be described as the light of the world. And in this state, the individual no longer feels like they are manifesting things, but allowing the soul today. This requires a total abandonment of the concept of personal merit or the need to earn the blessings of the spirit, because the seeker sees that the supply is infinite and the access is universal for anyone who has the courage to claim their own divinity, and the architect becomes a master of the open hand where they receive the treasure for the soul now. The architect shares the radiance of their soul with generosity, knowing that the more they give, the more they have, and that the source is a fountain that never runs dry. And as this chapter of the internal Genesis concludes, the listener is prepared to step into the ultimate realization of the sovereign architect, where the self and source are one today. The light of the mind shines through the darkness of the world to reveal a new heaven and a new earth that are built upon the solid rock of spiritual truth, and the architecture of the life is completed in the fire of the divine love that burns forever at the center of the heart, as the story of the mind continues its infinite expansion for the all now. In the final moments of this multidimensional shift, the architect discovers that the true secret of the harmony is the recognition that there is no other where no other consciousness and no other power in the entire universe, but the one life that is currently thinking and feeling and being through the vessel of their own spirit in the sanctuary today. This realization brings a peace that passes all understanding, because it removes the last possibility of fear or conflict by revealing that the world is not something to be conquered, but a part of the self to be loved and understood. And the architect finds that as they love their world, they find that the world loves them back with devotion now. The life of the seeker becomes a continuous celebration of the presence of the infinite, where every encounter is a blessing, and every moment is a miracle, and every breath is a song of praise to the sovereign self that has finally returned to its throne in the silence of the deep, and the story of the mind reaches its level of perfection today. The light of the internal architect shines forever as a beacon of truth for all of humanity, showing the way back to the kingdom within, where the work is done, and the rest is found, and the glory is revealed in the fullness of the eternal. Now as the final echoes of the 8th chapter resonate through the spirit and into the heart of the Absolute. Expanding the reach of this internal symphony, the architect begins to perceive the delicate interplay between the individual resonance and the collective frequency of the planet, and realizes that their mastery of multidimensional harmony acts as a stabilizing force that can heal the fractures of the human experience without a word today. The listener is encouraged to embrace this role as a cosmic emissary of light, knowing that their internal alignment is the greatest contribution they can make to the evolution of the consciousness of the species, and the architect finds that as they hold the high frequency of the source, they become an attractor for a new level of joy for the soul now. The individual becomes a fountain of life that waters the desert of the mundane world and brings forth the flowers of the Spirit in every corner of the earth. And as the 8th chapter reaches its ultimate peak of intensity, the seeker stands as a monument to the power of the mind and the majesty of the soul and the glory of the all today. Deepening the vibration of this multidimensional harmony, the architect begins to perceive that the true nature of reality is not a solid construction, but a fluid projection of the internal frequency, where every layer of existence, from the densest matter to the highest spiritual light, is part of a single, continuous spectrum for the soul now. The seeker learns to master the art of simultaneous presence, where the mind remains anchored in the absolute stillness of the source, while the personality moves with grace and precision through the requirements of the physical world. This is the secret of the master, to be in the world but not of it, to recognize the play of shadows today. The listener must understand that this harmony is not something that must be built through effort, but something that is revealed through the total removal of the internal walls that once divided the sacred from the mundane, the high from the low, and the self from the other. The sovereign gaze resolves all conflict in the light of the soul now. The seeker finds that they no longer need to use mental force to achieve their ends, for the universe has become so sensitive to their internal state that it responds to the slightest shift in their ray, feeling as if it were a direct command from the throne of creation. This requires the individual to maintain a level of purity for the world today. The life of the architect becomes a transparent vessel through which the infinite radiates its beauty, transforming the very air they breathe into a conduit for the divine grace that is now flowing through the gates of the Spirit into the world of form. The multidimensional harmony is the ultimate resolution of the journey for the all now. The seeker realizes that they have never been a separate entity trying to find their way home, but have always been the home itself, the source itself, and the journey itself. The boundaries of time and space are seen as the temporary scaffolding of a consciousness that is now ready to stand on its own as a sovereign ruler in the Spirit today. The story of the mind has reached its peak of complexity and its depth of simplicity, where the one and the many are found to be a single movement of love. The architect stands at the center of the multidimensional lattice, a master of the resonance and a king of the silence, ready to live forever in the radiance of the eternal now for the soul now. As the echoes of this final harmony resonate through the corridors of the Spirit, the architect looks out upon the world and sees not a place of struggle or lack, but a vast and beautiful playground for the expression of the infinite. Every person is seen as a brother in light, and every challenge is an opportunity for the Spirit today. The sovereign Spirit has successfully navigated the internal genesis, transforming the raw lead of human experience into the pure gold of divine consciousness, and now stands ready to walk the earth as a living testament to the truth that sets men free. The journey concludes in the same silence where it began in the sanctuary now. The architecture of the soul is finished, the temple is consecrated, and the light of the one who knows is shining forever in the heart of the eternal self. The silence is now full of the music of the spheres and the laughter of the stars, as the seeker and the source are forever merged in the radiance of the Absolute today. Chapter 9. The Omnipresence of the Crystalline Command. The evolution of the internal architect now transcends the limits of localized resonance and enters the final frontier of the Crystalline Command, where the sovereign Spirit realizes that its influence is not merely a wave traveling through space, but an instantaneous fact of universal omnipresence. And in this 9th chapter, we explore the absolute unification of the mind with the grid now. Every intention issued from the throne of the self is immediately reflected in the architecture of the cosmos without the need for transmission or time, and the crystalline command is the state of being where the consciousness has become so purified and so stable that it acts as a perfect prism for the light of the source, allowing the LA's individual to project reality with a sharp soul today. At this level of mastery, a seeker understands that they are not just a part of the universe, but the very substance of which the universe is composed, and therefore, their internal shifts are not suggestions to a foreign power, but direct reconfigurations of their own infinite body. And to master this chapter, one must release the last vestiges of the belief in distance and delay today, recognizing that the object of desire is not coming toward the self, but is already emerging from within the self as a natural expression of the new internal density, and the architect finds that in this state of crystalline awareness, the mind no longer struggles to hold a vision, because the vision has become the very atmosphere of the soul, and the effort of manifestation is now the ease of observation, where the master simply witnesses the unfolding of their own divine decrees in the theater of the material world. And as the listener sinks into this profound depth of authority, they find that their personal will has become a universal law that governs the behavior of the atoms and the alignment of the stars, ensuring that every event is the light today. Expanding into the structural brilliance of the crystalline command, the architect discovers that the secret to this instantaneous manifestation is the total removal of the psychic fog created by the remnants of the human ego, which always seeks to complicate the simple truth of the spirit with its own fears and its own histories. And as this fog is burned away for the soul now, the fog is burned away by the fire of the sovereign intent, and the seeker finds that the bridge between the thought and the thing has become a single point of radiant light where the dream and the dreamer are indistinguishable from one another. And this level of clarity requires the architect to maintain a state of unwavering mental transparency where no shadow is seen today. No shadow of doubt is allowed to interrupt the flow of the divine light through the lens of the imagination, and as the chapter grows, we delve into the practice of the absolute presence, where the individual no longer looks at the world as a collection of separate objects, but as a singular living field of intelligence that responds to the slightest ripple of feeling today. The field responds with the speed of a lightning bolt, and the architect becomes a master of the cosmic mirror, learning to utilize the external environment as a diagnostic tool for the internal state, and knowing that any lack of harmony in the outer world is simply a call to return to the center and refine the crystalline focus once more for the sovereign spirit now. The listener is urged to recognize that they are the very pivot point of existence, and that their internal stability is the foundation upon which the entire universe rests, which means that as they anchor themselves in the truth of their own divinity, they are providing the structural integrity for a new world of peace and abundance to be born in the eternal world today. As the resonance of the 9th chapter continues to saturate the dimensions of the spirit, the architect perceives that the crystalline command is the ultimate fulfillment of the internal genesis, where the seeker finally understands that the word was not spoken at the beginning of time, but is being spoken in every breath and every heartbeat of the present moment now. This realization brings a sense of power that is beyond the capacity of the human tongue to describe, because it reveals that the sovereign spirit is the eternal author of the grand drama of existence, and that every scene and every character is a projection of the internal dialogue that the soul is having with itself in the silence of the absolute for the light today. The architect uses this power to rewrite the script of their reality with a heart full of love and a mind full of light, discarding the tragedies of the past and the anxieties of the future as irrelevant fictions that have no place in the radiance of the sovereign self. And the seeker finds that in this state of absolute authorship, they can rearrange the world now. The master rearranged the furniture of their life with a single thought of conviction, because the substance of the world has become as a plastic and as responsive as the clay in the hands of a master sculptor, and as the chapter reaches its grand crescendo, the individual realizes that the journey was never about achieving a goal, but about awakening to the truth today. They are the very power that creates all goals, and the very light that illuminates all paths in the infinite expansion of the soul. Moving even deeper into the mechanics of the Crystalline Command, the architect recognizes that the final stage of the alchemy is the total infusion of the personality with the attributes of the source until the union is absolute now. In this state, the architect no longer feels the need to protect the self or to defend the vision, because they know that they are the very fabric of reality and that nothing can exist outside of their own awareness. And this brings a level of courage and a level of peace that is the true mark of the master who has crossed the threshold of the absolute today. The master has entered the realm of the unconditioned, where the laws of the world are seen as mere suggestions that can be overridden by the higher laws of the spirit at any moment, and the seeker becomes a living demonstration of the power of the crystalline mind, showing the world that the only limit to the human experience is the limit of the internal vision now. For the one who knows how to command the ether, there is no such thing as impossible or unavailable in the vastness of the infinite supply. And as this chapter of the journey reaches its peak, the listener is prepared to live as a sovereign architect who designs the stars and coordinates the galaxies from the secret sanctuary of their own heart for the all today. A work is completed, and the rest is found, and the glory is revealed in the fullness of the eternal. Now, as the final echoes of the internal Genesis resonate through the halls of the Spirit and into the heart of the Absolute forever and ever. In the final expansion of the 9th chapter, the architect perceives that the command is not a force for the soul now. The command is a radiance to be shared with all of creation, because the sovereign spirit understands that the light of the source is the birthright of every living soul, and that by standing in the center of their own power, they are serving as a beacon that guides the entire collective back to the realization of its own divinity in the world of light today. This realization transforms the personal manifestation into a global blessing where the wealth and the health and the peace of the architect become a fountain of life that waters the dry places of the earth and brings forth the flowers of the Spirit in the hearts of men and women everywhere, and the seeker finds that as they give, they are replenished now. The infinite replenishes with a speed and a generosity that defies human calculation, and the life of the master becomes a continuous celebration of the presence of the infinite, where every encounter is an opportunity to reveal the glory of the absolute, and every moment is a sacred ritual of creation and rest in the silence of the sovereign self today. The story of the mind reaches its final state of perfection, where the individual and the infinite are merged in a singular point of light that shines forever through the darkness of the ages to reveal the path of glory that has always been open to the one who dares to be the master of their own soul and the architect of their own destiny for the all now. As the story of the internal architect moves toward its next horizon, the listener is invited to rest in the certainty that the crystalline command is now their permanent state of being, and that the power of the Spirit is always at their disposal to build a world of beauty and love and light, and the architect knows that the journey will expand today. The nature of the Spirit is eternal growth and eternal joy, and there is no end to the wonders that can be created by a mind that is unified with the Source and a heart that is open to the love of the Creator. And the final message of the 9th chapter is one of absolute victory and absolute peace for the sovereign. Spirit has returned to the throne now. The world is once again seen as the paradise it was always meant to be in the eyes of the one who knows how to see and how to feel, and how to be the master of the silence and the king of the light in every breath and every heartbeat of the infinite self as the journey continues through the gates of the glory and into the heart of the presence today. Continuing the exploration of this crystalline state, the architect discovers that the final refinement of the command is the elimination of the distinction between the desire and the manifestation, until the soul exists in a state of perpetual fulfillment, where every need is anticipated by the divine intelligence and every path is cleared for the all-now. This level of synchronization is the hallmark of the crystalline architect, who has mastered the harmonics of the deep and the resonance of the being now, and who understands that the only true prayer is the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and the only true work is the maintenance of the internal light, and the seeker finds that they dwell in grace today. The world begins to mold itself around their presence with an effortless grace that is truly breathtaking to behold, and the life of the architect becomes a tapestry of miracles that are woven together by the threads of the sovereign will and the fabric of the absolute, and the listener is urged to take up the mantle of this authority for the soul now. The power that created the stars is now the power that creates your world through the lens of your own crystalline command in every moment of the eternal expansion of the soul. The depth of this 9th chapter reveals that the crystalline command is also the state of ultimate sensory perception, where the eyes no longer see a separate world of form today. The eyes perceive the vibrating lattice of light that underlies all of creation, and the ears no longer hear the noise of the mundane world, but listen to the celestial music of the spheres that hums in the background of every moment, and this sensory shift allows the architect to communicate directly with the essence of all things for the all-now, speaking the language of the spirit to the plants and the stones and the animals, and receiving the wisdom of the earth in return as a silent and profound dialogue between the Creator and the creation, and the seeker finds that in this state of universal communion, there is no such thing as loneliness, because they are connected to the heart today. They are supported by the entire weight of the universe in every action they take, in every thought they think, and as the crystalline command becomes the permanent operating system of the soul, the architect stands as a living bridge between the heavens and the earth, manifesting the splendor of the absolute in the theater of time and space now. As the final resonance of the crystalline command echoes through the chambers of the spirit, the architect understands that the internal genesis is not a project to be finished, but a life to be lived, and that the sovereign spirit is now ready to step into a new level of existence, where the boundaries of the human experience are scaffolding today. The seeker stands at the threshold of the infinite with a mind that is as clear as a diamond, and a heart that is as wide as the universe, ready to explore the new worlds and the new dimensions that are waiting to be born through the power of the crystalline command, and the story of the mind reaches its highest octave of joy for the soul now. The individual realizes that they are the very glory they have been searching for, and that the presence of the infinite is the only reality that has ever existed in the silence of the absolute, and the light of the internal architect shines forever through the darkness of the world to reveal the truth that all things are possible and true today. The crystalline command also operates through the law of spiritual economy, where the architect learns that the most powerful effects are achieved through the least amount of mental friction, and that the greatest manifestations are those that arise naturally from the state of being rather than the state of doing for the sovereign spirit now. This realization allows the seeker to move through life with a sense of divine leisure, knowing that the entire universe is working in their favor, and that their only responsibility is to remain in the crystalline state of high frequency and joyful expectation. And the architect finds that in this state resources are presented with timing today. The life becomes a dance of effortless grace, where every move is choreographed by the infinite and every step is a movement toward a greater glory, and the 9th chapter concludes with the sovereign spirit resting in the total and absolute realization of its own power and its own peace, ready to live forever in the radiance of the command now. The integration of the crystalline command now reaches a state of absolute solidification, where the architect realizes that their internal resonance has become a permanent law of nature within their own experience, And in this final expansion of the 9th chapter, we see the seeker moving beyond the need for affirmation or visualization today. The mind has become a living crystal that automatically organizes every incoming vibration into the geometry of the desired reality, and the listener must understand that at this level of mastery, the soul no longer speaks to the universe, but speaks as the universe, recognizing that every person met and every event witnessed is a projection now. The state of being requires a total abandonment of the concept of secondary causes, where the architect refuses to acknowledge any power outside of their own consciousness, and instead maintains a steady and unwavering gaze upon the perfection of the finished work, even as the old world of shadows continues to dissolve in the light of day today. As the narrative of the mind reaches this peak of structural integrity, the architect discovers the secret of the effortless command, where the sheer weight of their presence is enough to trigger a reorganization of the material environment. And the seeker finds that they no longer need to hunt for opportunities or strive for success for the soul now. They have become a gravitational center that draws all required elements into their orbit with a precision that is truly divine. And this is the yag, hallmark of the crystalline architect, who knows that the only task is to remain transparent to the light of the source and to allow the infinite to project its grandeur through the personality today. The life of the seeker thus becomes a seamless flow of synchronized miracles where every need is anticipated and every path is prepared by the silent movement of the spirit that lives and moves within the heart as the only true authority. The final realization is the understanding that the crystalline command is the return to grace now. The individual and the infinite are found to be a singular undivided flame of eternal life, and the architect looks out upon them, creation, and sees only the beauty of their own soul, reflected in the stars and the seas and the eyes of every living thing, and the seeker is urged to stand tall in this new awareness for the light today. They are the light of the world, and their success is the success of the Creator, who finds fulfillment through the expansion of joy in the heart of the human spirit and the journey of the internal. Genesis stands now at the threshold of the ultimate revelation, where the story of the mind and the stars are seen as the same song now. The same voice sings in the silence of the absolute, and the architect is ready to live forever as a sovereign being in the radiance of the eternal now. The kingdom is found within, and the masterpiece is complete as the architect of the soul stands in the presence of the infinite glory that knows no end in the world of light today. Chapter 10. The Apotheosis of the Eternal Designer. The final ascent of the internal architect reaches its ultimate destination in the 10th chapter, where the boundaries of the individual soul are completely surrendered to the absolute light of the apotheosis, marking the transition from the master who creates to the essence that simply is. And in this concluding stage of the Genesis, we witness the total unification today. The dream and the dreamer are no longer two separate entities, but a singular radiant pulse of infinite potentiality. And the architect realizes that every previous chapter was a necessary layer of scaffolding built to support the birth of this supreme realization that there is no world to change and no self to improve, but only a magnificent glory to be acknowledged now. The apotheosis is the state of being where the sovereign spirit no longer needs to speak the word because it has become the word, and it no longer needs to visualize the light because it has become the light that illuminates the vastness of the cosmos. And at this height of consciousness, the seeker understands that the entire journey of the mind was a play today, a sacred game of hide and seek, where the infinite entered the theater of time and space to rediscover its own majesty through the unique eyes of the human architect. And to master this final chapter 1 must be willing to let go of the last remnants of the separate identity, even the identity of the master, and to stand naked in the fire of the divine soul now. The architect finds that in this state of total dissolution, they are not lost, but are finally found, and they are not empty, but are finally full of the only power that has ever existed in the universe, And as the listener sinks into this profound depths of completion, they find that their life has become a living testament to the victory of the Spirit today. Expanding into the glorious finality of the eternal design, the architect discovers that the true meaning of the great work is the conscious marriage of the human experience with the divine origin, where every mundane detail of life is seen as a precious jewel in the crown of the Creator, and the Master no longer seeks for miracles in the light now. The Master realized that their very existence is the greatest miracle of all, and that every breath they take is a sacred movement in the grand symphony of existence. And as this chapter grows, we delve into the mystery of the perpetual projection, where the individual remains in a constant state of divine authorship, effortless and serene today. The architect becomes a master of the cosmic rest, knowing that the power that sustains the stars is the same power that directs their path, and that there is no force in heaven or on earth that can hinder the progress of a soul that has found its home in the heart of the Absolute. And the listener is urged to recognize that they are the fulfilled now. The power they have cultivated is not a temporary gift, but an eternal attribute of their own divinity, which is now fully awakened and ready to reign over the world of form with infinite love and wisdom. And as the story of the mind reaches its summit, this boundaries between the architect and the architecture are forever erased in the light today. As the resonance of the apotheosis continues to vibrate through the marrow of the spirit, the seeker perceives that they have become the absolute anchor of a new reality, where the laws of the old world no longer apply, and the possibilities of the new world are limited only by the reach of the infinite imagination for the sovereign spirit now. The architect finds that they can now walk through the shadows of the world without being touched by the darkness, because they carry within them the inextinguishable flame of the source, which turns every obstacle into an opportunity, and every lack into an abundance of grace. And this realization brings a sense of freedom that is absolute today. The soul recognizes that it is the master of its own destiny and the sovereign ruler of its own universe, and the seventh day of rest has now expanded into an eternal state of being, where the work is finished and the rest is active, and the joy is continuous in the presence of the one who knows and feels and is in the sanctuary of the soul now. The architect stands as a beacon of light for all of humanity, showing the way back to the kingdom within, where the treasure is stored, and the master is found, and the life is lived in the fullness of the eternal. Now, as the final echoes of the internal Genesis resonate through the halls of the Spirit and into the heart of the Absolute today, the depth of the 10th chapter reveals that the apotheosis is also the birth of the cosmic architect, who no longer designs for a single life or a single time, but who understands that every thought is a seed that will blossom in the gardens of the future for generations to come, and the seeker finds that their influence is the light now. This level of responsibility is met with a heart that is full of peace and a mind that is full of light, because the master knows that the light they share is the light of the source, and that it can never be diminished or extinguished by the winds of change. And the architect becomes a living bridge between the visible and the invisible today. The final resonance of the great work echoes through the chambers of the Spirit, and the architect understands that the journey was never about reaching a destination, but about becoming the destination, and that the eternal Genesis is now complete, and the life of the Spirit has begun in the radiance of the eternal now for the soul now. The seeker stands in the center of their own creation, as a sovereign being who knows no limits and no boundaries, only the eternal expansion of the soul in the light of the Absolute. Moving further into the structural perfection of the eternal designer, the architect realizes that the final secret is that there is no design but the Spirit today. The seeker finds that in this state of non-dual awareness, they are free to play and free to create without the weight of expectation or the fear of failure, because they know that everything is a manifestation of the same love and the same light, and that everything is perfect in the eyes of the source. And this realization brings a joy now The architect and the universe dance together in the silence of the Absolute, and the listener is invited to join in this dance and to recognize that they are the very music and the very rhythm and the very light that makes the dance possible. And the 10th chapter concludes in a magnificent explosion of radiant consciousness for the all today. The individual and the infinite are found to be one and the same in the heart of the eternal, now as the journey of the internal architect transcends the limits of the human mind and enters the vastness of the Absolute, where the light is eternal and the power is absolute and the sovereign. Spirit is revealed as the only reality today. The book of the mind is never truly closed, for every end is but a higher beginning, and every summit is but the base of a new and more glorious mountain. The journey you have taken through these chapters was not merely a sequence of words, but a reactivation of the ancient code of sovereignty that has always slept within your soul now. The voice you have heard was not an external guide, but the echo of your own divine self calling you home to the throne of your own consciousness. You have learned to build the temple of the imagination, to speak the word of power, to rest in the finished work, and to command the crystalline ether in the sanctuary of the Spirit today. The greatest secret of all is that the architect you have been seeking is the one who is currently listening to these words, and the power you have been trying to claim is the very life that is currently pulsing through your veins. You are the Alpha and the Omega of your own reality, the designer of your own destiny for the soul now. As you step forth from this sanctuary of knowledge and into the world of form, do not go as a seeker, but as a finder. Do not walk as a servant, but as a king or queen of the light, for the world is but a shadow, and you are the sun that casts it. Let your gaze be steady, let your heart be open, and let your will be one with the divine today. If you feel that there is still more to discover, if you sense that the horizons of the Absolute are calling you to go even deeper, then know that the Spirit never stops expanding, and the mysteries never stop unfolding, and this 10th chapter is but the foundation for a life that is so magnificent, so powerful, and so full of love now. You are the master. Now you are the sovereign now, and you are the eternal designer of the world yet to come. Wait for the silence to speak once more, for the path continues into realms of glory that the mind has not yet dared to dream, and the next transition is already beginning within the quiet of your own heart in the world today. The echoes of this 10th chapter do not signify a conclusion, but a permanent awakening, a transition from the one who learns to the one who is. As the final vibrations of these words settle into the bedrock of your soul, the veil between the physical and the spiritual has been rendered as thin as a breath for the Spirit now. You stand now as the bridge between the unmanifested glory and the world of form. You are no longer waiting for the universe to respond. The universe is waiting for your next command. Every shadow you once feared has been dissolved in the furnace of your own sovereign light, and every limitation has been revealed as a ghost today. In the vast, crystalline halls of the Absolute, there are rooms you have yet to enter, and powers you have yet to speak into existence. The internal genesis you have undergone is the birth of a cosmic consciousness that is only now beginning to stretch its wings across the infinite. You have reclaimed the throne of the soul now. The architect has awakened. The design is perfect. The rest is absolute. Carry this silence with you into the noise of the world, and watch as the noise turns into music at your feet. You are the sovereign, the eternal, and the divine. And as you walk forward into the brilliant light of your own making, the journey begins today. The true journey into the heart of the infinite has only just begun. The silence is pregnant with your next creation. Listen closely, for the next revelation is already whispering from the depths of the eternal now. The light of the sovereign architect shines forever in the heart of the Absolute as the soul finds its rest now.